Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call the regular meeting of the Maricopa Community College District Governing Board to order. I would like to ask Ms. Haber if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no college reports scheduled for this evening. We'll go directly to a Faculty Executive Council report. Ms. Selena Bednarek.
President Gutierrez, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, CEC, and guests. Tonight is a momentous night as we prepare to say our farewell to Dr. Glasper. As we celebrate him this evening, I would like to start by saying a few words about how he has impacted the lives of so many of us at Maricopa Community Colleges. During his 13 years as Chancellor, Dr. Glasper has been instrumental in continuing the tradition of excellence for which Maricopa is nationally known. His forward thinking has led us to success for faculty, students, and staff. Through his vision of One Maricopa, he established the goal of a seamless student experience and worked tirelessly to maintain our stature as one of the best community college systems in the country. His ability to recognize just how paramount full-time faculty members are to achieving student success has elevated the level of academic excellence throughout the 10 colleges of the district. Dr. Glasper's commitment to student success is evidenced by the adoption of the 60-40 policy, in which 60% of student instruction will be delivered by full-time faculty by 2022. Full-time faculty are able to provide students access to resources as residential faculty continuously update and develop new curriculum. They assess program integrity and outcomes, and they create the collegiate environment integral to the academy and to academic quality. The Faculty Association thanks Dr. Glasper for his continued and unwavering commitment to student success and wishes him well on his future endeavors. One Maricopa will continue past the Chancellor's departure. It is likely that our next institutional leader will continue the great work already in motion. And I would like to reiterate that the faculty of Maricopa are committed and have always been to moving in a direction that benefits student learning and access to education. The Faculty Association is equally supportive of embracing changes that improve the working conditions of the faculty and staff of this great organization and betters our community. Finally, tonight you are faced with a decision regarding a $2 per credit tuition increase. I respect the fiscal decisions that can be some of the most difficult that you face, requiring you to make tough decisions to protect the quality of the institution as well as represent the interests of your constituents. If the district is to remain great, to build and continue to improve upon decades of innovation and quality, and to serve the citizens, industries, and taxpayers at the level they expect, then the board must consider the ramifications of not investing in that greatness. The quality of education delivered depends on having resources available to provide the best for our students and our communities. As you all are very well aware, our district is no longer supported by state funding and requires alternative revenue generation to meet the needs of our students and our communities. Our business and industry partners are counting on us to produce skilled individuals ready to enter the workforce to move the needle further on our already great economic impact that we have on our state. I urge you to help us further our mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Bednarek? Thank you. Mr. Leo Valverde, Adjunct Faculty Association report.
Senor Gutierrez, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, members of the CEC, guests. My name is Leo Valverde. I am president of the Adjunct Faculty Association, and I'd like to report on a few things and also wish Dr. Glasper well, but that'll come in a minute. Last time I reported that the Adjunct Faculty Association would be electing its next president. I am pleased to announce and introduce Gail Haas, who will step into the role of AFA president beginning July 1st, which still means you have me for a little while longer. Ms. Haas teaches political science and ethics, mainly at Chandler Gilbert, and I look forward to working with her as we transition leadership into the future. As part of that transition, the Adjunct Faculty Association is going to be holding a town hall in the spirit of the presidential election season. It's the first that we've done in a while on March the 6th, and I will send invitations to everyone for attendance. And it is our hope to get information from our adjunct faculty in a direct line rather than emails or flyers, and question and answers so that we know what issues are on the adjunct faculty minds. In addition to that, we recently sent out and completed our survey of adjunct faculty. I am very pleased to announce that we had over 1,000 responses from our adjunct faculty. That is a very big number for a voluntary survey. This is much more than simple demographics or data. It needs to be analyzed. We've partnered with ASU in the creation of the instrument, but also its analysis. And we will have a report sometime this summer. But anecdotally, looking from just some of the raw data, what I can tell you is that there is a feeling of disconnect of adjunct faculty, and in particular in decision making, both at the college and at the district level. A case in point, as the search for the next chancellor begins, there is no adjunct faculty representation on the search committee. Residential faculty is represented. The professional staff is represented. We are not. And I have heard a number of people comment on that to me about our lack of representation. But that task is a big task for the committee members, but also for the board to replace and choose the next chancellor. And what I would like to say is extend a personal thanks to Dr. Glasper for his support of adjunct faculty, for his inclusion of adjunct faculty, and his leadership of this district. There is a large pair of shoes to fill with the next president. But as we move forward, and as I have said in the past, for Dr. Harper Marinick, our interim chancellor, and all of the leadership here, as always, the adjunct faculty and the Adjunct Faculty Association stand ready to assist you. All you have to do is ask. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Thank you, Mr. Valverde. Oh, question, sorry.
I just want to thank you for my past being an adjunct faculty and to all the work that everyone that stands in the adjunct faculty world does. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're very much a part of Maricopa.
It's our pleasure. It's our honor. Thank you.
Thank you. We're on item 6.1, the Emeritus Distinction Award. I would like to, without objection, move to a item on 12.1, which is regarding the same subject. And so we are going therefore to 6.2, the Association of Governing Boards Nason Award. Mr. Sarr.
May I go to the podium?
Of course.
Members of the governing board, me and Dr. Glasper, and members of CEC and guests. I'm here to introduce Dr. David Maxwell. David served as president of Drake University and held a faculty appointment as professor of literature. Dr. Maxwell was at Tufts University as a faculty member in Russian language and literature and served as dean of undergraduate studies. Dr. Maxwell is currently a member of the Grinnell, Iowa College Board of Trustees and is a senior fellow of the Association of Governing Boards and a member of AGB's consulting practice. Just kind of a little bit more about him. In May of 2011, Dr. Maxwell climbed the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro with his two sons and members of the Drake University football team. David is here with us tonight on behalf of the Association of Governing Boards to make a presentation to our governing board. Dr. Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you, and it's wonderful to be here. I should point out, one of the things you may have noticed in the brief bio, that I came in on the tail end of your previous session and I heard the word brevity a lot. I'm a Russian literature scholar and a recovering university president, so I've got a different definition of brief. But I will be as brief and focused as the situation allows. But the first thing I want to do before talking a bit about the award and its history and who Nason was and why we have selected you for this award is to thank you all for what you do. These are very, very challenging times for higher education. I don't have to tell you that. And to thank you as members of the board, all of you who are campus presidents, all of you who are here who are faculty and adjunct faculty and staff. It's a very important thing that you all do and that we all do in higher education. And so I want to make sure you know how much your service is appreciated. Also want to say as well, congratulations to Dr. Glasper for just an incredible run here at Maricopa and for what he's about to do next. So let me tell you a little bit about AGB, the Association of Governing Boards, so you know who this group is that's bestowing the award. It was founded in 1921, and it has had one mission the entire time, and that is to strengthen and protect this country's unique form of institutional governance for higher education and foundations through research, through service, and through advocacy. We serve, and I say we, as you noted, I'm a senior fellow of AGB now. I apparently I was at Drake for 16 years as the president, and I fulfilled everybody's expectation that I'm not any good at retirement. So we serve more than 1,300 member boards, 1,900 institutions, 36,000 individuals. It's the only national organization that provides university and college presidents, board members, board chairs, board professionals of both public and private institutions and institutionally related foundations with the resources that can enhance their effectiveness. AGB created the John W. Nason Award for Board Service in just this last year, so you are part of the inaugural class of this award. And in doing it, AGB's leadership and directors sought an opportunity to recognize boards that have demonstrated exceptional leadership and initiative, unusual courage in the face of difficult circumstances, and significant achievement that benefits the institution or the system in ways that truly matter. So I want to emphasize that this award is not merely for being a very good board, it's for doing something truly exceptional in ways that the board truly stands out. It's named after a higher education leader who demonstrated these characteristics personally and who was a staunch advocate for good governance. John W. Nason was born in 1905, passed away in 2001. He began his professional life, as a philosophy professor, and during the course of his life, he served as the president of both Swarthmore College and Carleton College, two of the top liberal arts colleges in the country. He was also president of the Foreign Policy Association, and AGB was honored to have him serve as the director of its commission on the future of colleges and university trusteeship. He was an author, a mentor, an advisor, a speaker for the association, an integral part of everything that AGB was and is. He made immense contributions to the field of higher education governance and boards, including authoring 7 books. And 2 of them, for those of us who serve on boards, were tremendously and are tremendously important. The Nature of Trusteeship, The Roles and Responsibilities of College and University Boards, which was published in '82, and The Future of Trusteeship, The Roles and Responsibilities of College and University Boards. And those were 2 of the early works that really laid out in both conceptual and practical terms what boards do and what they should be doing to serve their institutions. One of the things that Jim did that I find just truly remarkable, and it says a great deal about who he was, and that is tremendously moving, is that he served as the chair of the National Japanese American Student Relocation Council. And in that role, he helped more than 4,000 intern Japanese American students continue their studies at higher education institutions throughout the United States during World War II. So last fall, in the fall of 2015, we put out a call for nominations for the Nason Award, and we received over 45 applications or nominations describing very impressive work led by boards of public, private, and foundation boards. The entries were reviewed by a panel of judges, of which I was one, representing public and private colleges and universities and foundation boards, and we were led in this effort by the Honorable Phil Bredesen, who is the former governor of Tennessee. He is also the chaired AGB's 2014 Commission on the Future of Higher Education Board Governance, and was instrumental in the development of a subsequent report, which I hope you've all had the opportunity to read. Consequential Boards, Adding Value Where It Matters Most. It's a very, very important report that I think has been very helpful to boards, both public and private, around the country. I can tell you personally, as a member of the selection panel, that the judging was very difficult. It was challenging because so many of the nominees had done remarkable things. They'd strengthened their institutions, reimagined board work, and made a significant difference to the students they serve, which is ultimately the most important thing we do. They dealt with adversity and took advantage of opportunity. They proved themselves to be outstanding, exceptional boards. But among this pack, a handful of them stood out from all the others. And in considering your narrative, all of us agreed that you as a board and a system faced an incredible and difficult and sensitive challenge. What impressed us most was the way in which you presented a unified front. You truly stepped up to the plate, provided support, and bravely faced down public criticism and political pressure. And in using your own resources and influence, you demonstrated strong engagement and adopted a leadership role during what was clearly a truly frightening situation. We admired your tenacity throughout this serious threat to the system's financial stability, its integrity, and its reputation. And we were equally impressed by the way in which you supported your chancellor in a very public way at a time of state disinvestment and a politically contentious environment. And more importantly, more remarkable was the fact that you not only navigated an intensely difficult challenge, but you recognized it as an opportunity to strengthen the district. For all of this and more, I am delighted on behalf of the Association of Governing Boards to present to you the Governing Board of the Maricopa County Community College District on behalf of the association, the John W. Nason Award for Board Service. Shall I bring, can I ask you and the Chancellor to come down to receive this? Is that appropriate? This is what it looks like. And fortunately, I did not have to fly out here with it today. They shipped it ahead of time. Okay.
Does anyone have an iPhone? Mary's ready. Let me share what this is about. And Lee, would you join me, please? When the Nason Awards came out, we received a notice, and I believe we saw it the same day. And Lee Combs, our general counsel, came to us and said that he believes that the work that the colleges have done in our district and our support of our board by making IT number one, information technology, when we had our cyber incident, and sticking with it and providing the resources and moving through to the change that we should move forward and submit it. So I will ask him to share just a few comments about how we have done that in terms of keeping it at the forefront and why he felt, and I supported him, that we needed to bring this forward. And as you heard Dr. Maxwell, out of 45 submissions, we stood out. And I think it says a lot about our board, it says a lot about our district, and it says a lot about our tenacity, and those were the words. So I'll just ask him to make a few words as well.
Thank you, sir. President Gutierrez, members of the board, members of the CEC, and guests. I've worked in public education for over 30 years. I've served many capacities on many different boards. I've served as an attorney for all that period of time. I've seen a lot of boards in crisis, public boards, and I have never seen a board respond to a crisis as strongly and with as great a degree of focus as this board did after the data security incident that we experienced in 2013. I've seen boards that could have come apart. This board could have come apart and floundered in dealing with the crisis, but it did not. There was dissension, there was discussion, there was public pressure and outcry, but the board maintained its respect for leadership and process and principle, and really was the key to making data security job one, which was our salvation in managing this problem and getting past it. I will add one brief postscript. Don't get cocky. Everybody that I talk to in information technology tells me that data security is a long game. It requires a commitment by the organization that often is very difficult to maintain. We all want to put our resources into service to students. That's why we're here. And so we have difficult choices to make. But if the board can maintain the kind of commitment that I've seen, I have confidence as I leave the organization next month that data security and everything else is in good hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Maxwell. That was, you described this board, and I lived through that period of time, as did Mr. Saar, who was president, Mr. Burke, who was president during that period. And thank you. I didn't think we looked that good. We were arguing and fighting, and but at the end of the day, I guess we always came together and defended the institution. So perhaps we merit it. Thank you so much.
I think you do. And I can tell you as a member of the panel that as I sat in my study in the mountains of North Carolina reading the applications, when I got to yours, I sort of started shaking my head and said, my goodness, that must have been really, really hard. And to see the board step up. And quite frankly, every good board argues. It's just you do it with civility and respect and mutual support. If everybody on the board thinks the same thing at the same time, then you only need one of you.
We were at the edge of civility. The very, very edge.
As long as you're on the right side of the edge. But congratulations again.
Thank you, Doctor. But it's heavy. That's heavy. We're going to the citizens interim, and I'm required to read this. The board offers opportunity for members of the public to address the governing board. In compliance with the open meeting law, the governing board will neither discuss nor take action on issues raised during this portion of the agenda. When necessary, issues will be taken under advisement and placed on a subsequent agenda. I'll call the names as they are given to us. We will give you a notice at 4 minutes.
Point of order,
Yes, ma'am?
Mr. President.
Yes, ma'am.
As I recall, our governing minutes suggest 5 minutes.
It does. The way we work, we give you a notice at 4 minutes, and then you wrap it up. It's been our experience that the normal wrap-up takes a minute, sometimes 2 or 3, and we have to interrupt. But yes, Ms. Smith has a timer that normally she cooks with, but she's kind enough to bring it. The first person is Elizabeth Buckhorn. Ms. Buckhorn.
It's actually Buckton,
Buckton, I'm sorry, ma'am,
That's
I
okay.
misread it.
but it's no longer Buckton. I don't have a last name, but that's okay.
Okay. You're not required to have one to speak.
Well, I had it changed a few years ago just to Elizabeth. But, anyways, I think tonight I'm going to table my speech until next month. I don't want to rain on the parade of the Chancellor. I do commend him for his service. I do welcome Maria Harper Marinick. I do commend her. I hold a lot of respect for her. I have done a lot of work this last month talking to employees. Again, I don't want to rain on the parade of your award, so I'm going to table my speech till next month. Thank you. Also, I have to leave tonight to go to a funeral to California, so leaving a governing board in the middle to me is rude, but I have to do this tonight, and I do apologize for this, and I'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth. Ann Omke. Ann Omke. Ms. Omke, your handwriting is almost as bad as mine. Now, that's a compliment.
It's been noted
I think you have to be brilliant to write this wonderfully.
President Gutierrez, MCC Board, and the administration, thank you for providing this interim time for speaking. I am Ann Omke, speaking on behalf of the Maricopa Retirees Association and its nearly 2,000 members. Would all executive board members please stand and be recognized at this time? We have written a proclamation for Dr. Glasper. I will read. Whereas Rufus Glasper has served the Maricopa Community Colleges and its multiple financial roles as well as chancellor for 30 years, and whereas Rufus Glasper has served as our mentor and friend, and whereas Rufus Glasper has been a proven champion by supporting MCCRA, its activities both financially and through contributing his personal time and participation. And whereas Rufus Glasper initiated and the continuation of district email in the provision for the quarterly and provision of the quarterly newsletter, Maricopa Gold, which I think all of you receive. Whereas Rufus Glasper has provided exceptional professional support services through his office, we, Rufus Glasper of Maricopa Community College District. Therefore, we want it be known that the MCCRA profoundly thanks and appreciates the support, friendship, and caring provided to MCRA. And further, we therefore let it be known that Rufus Glasper is duly elected to the board of MCCRA with the expectation that he lives a long, happy, and healthy life, and let this proclamation serve as a nomination for emeritus status in MCCRA. Thank you. We were here in the preliminary work session, and I noticed that you had a discussion relative to fees for seniors. Please note that the retiree board are seniors. Let me also add that we have been, one of our things that we have looked forward to and have worked for is actually a fee waiver for retirees. We would like to have you make that consideration as part of your proposal. Thank you very much. Dr.
Thank you
Glass.
very much, Ms. Oki. Somebody get a picture of that.
Right, that's what I mean.
I grab a backup for you. Technology was not my major.
Mary, I'll back you up.
I got you. Got your back.
All right.
Between the two of us.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oki.
Thank you.
Aaron Mixon.
Good evening, President Gutierrez, board members, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, members of the CEC, and guests. My name is Aaron Mixon. I am the student body president of Mesa Community College. I am here on behalf of the 20,000 plus students that I am in charge of. The students have drafted a letter to the governing board. I am going to read it. It reads, Governing Board, we the students of Mesa Community College, collectively known as ASMCC, are in favor of both the proposed tuition increases and property tax hike. We understand that the district is facing a long and hard uphill battle due to losing state funding and declining enrollment. We have been accustomed to the way of life specifically at our college and are willing to pay the $2 increase per credit hour to preserve the services at MCC and to boost the infrastructure in order to create a better environment for our teaching staff. As student leaders, we have a responsibility to the 20 plus students under our charge and freshman class for years to come. We believe that being able to maintain MCC's high level of learning as well as the premium services offered is partly our responsibility. And as main stakeholders of Mesa Community College, we find it that our voices need to be heard and considered when making decisions that specifically affect the student body, and our way of life. We lend our support and voices in favor of a tuition increase and tax hike in hopes that we can be a part of a decision that has the ability of minimizing the effects of the budget cuts while also demanding that creative solutions and long-standing policies be implemented to avert or monitor future budget crises and proposed tuition increases. Furthermore, we ask that as the governing board for the Maricopa Community College District, you consider and create ways of involving the entire student bodies from all the colleges under your charge when the conversation is of such. While this is a hard decision, we believe that it is a wise one. We also understand that at times the college may need to increase our investment as students into the learning environment that we benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mixon. Thank you very much. That completes. Thank you, sir. We'll make sure that each member receives a copy. That completes the slips that we have for us. Anyone else haven't filled out a slip? Fine. We will go now to the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda as amended?
I have the chancellor's report prior to the agenda.
Proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I would like to ask Ryan Demena from Demena and Associates, our external lobbyist, to give a legislative report, please.
Thank you, Chancellor Glasper. President Gutierrez, members of the board, Chancellor Glasper, members of CEC, and all others present, I'm here this evening to provide you with a brief legislative update. Today marks the 44th day of the 52nd Legislature second regular session. In total, there were 1,219 pieces of legislation and 106 memorials and resolutions introduced, for a grand total of 1,325 legislative proposals. We are presently tracking 72 different bills with a direct or indirect impact on the district. Last week was the deadline to hear bills in committee in the Chamber of Origin, which means that 720 bills that did not receive a committee hearing are effectively dead. I'm happy to report that the Community Colleges Expenditure Limitation legislation, Senate Bill 1322, was not one of the bills that fell victim to this deadline. In fact, Senate Bill 1322 received unanimous support from the Senate Education Committee and passed out of the Senate by a vote of 25 ayes, 3 nays, and 2 not voting. The bill was transmitted to the House of Representatives on February 15th. We're in the process of asking for a specific committee assignment and hopeful that the chairman will schedule the bill for hearing in the next 10 days. I'm also happy to announce that on February 17th, the governor signed into law Senate Bill 1525. Senate Bill 1525 is an emergency measure that restores the JTED funding that was cut in the fiscal year 2017 state budget. House Bill 2244, the legislation containing our red tape reduction efforts, will not be advancing this session. It became clear that policymakers had a number of questions on the components of this measure and how best to reduce the district's state-mandated administrative burden. We intend to work with the district's finance team to identify a broader menu of items for consideration, which we will then review with policymakers prior to introduction in the 2017 legislative session. There are 3 other noteworthy measures that I would like to briefly cover. Representatives Anthony Kern and Paul Boyer have both introduced legislation attempting to address free speech on university and community college campuses. We are coordinating with the universities and are very optimistic that there will be a consensus outcome. There is always the perennial legislation addressing the issue of guns on campus. This year there are roughly 10 of these bills, but the debate seems to have focused on House Bill 2338, which would prohibit the governing board of an educational institution from banning the possession of a concealed weapon in the person's vehicle on a right-of-way. We are working with stakeholders to identify a common sense middle ground. I want to thank briefly Eddie, Judy, Debbie, the team as well. It's just such a wonderful team here at the district that we work with to coordinate our efforts at the legislative or at the Capitol. And of course, this is the month where I would like to take a moment to thank Chancellor Glasper. It has been an honor and a privilege to work with you. You have served, I think it was stated earlier, to me as both a mentor and a friend, and you will be missed. But very much looking forward to working with our interim Vice Chancellor. With that, I'll be here next month to provide you with additional legislative updates. Happy to stand for questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, members.
Mr. Demena?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a couple of other comments and thank Mr.
Proceed,
Demena and his team for what they're doing, and as he mentioned, the Maricopa team as well. A couple of significant items that I think should be shared tonight, and one is our threshold for the foundation. We had a foundation board meeting today, and we have now reached, and Mary, correct me, we're about $36.5 million or so of our $50 million goal. And we have a couple of commitments along the way. Oh, and that does not include another $1 million that we that we should book from last month. We are working diligently with a number of what I would consider to be significant donors here in the Valley, and we are working to try and reach our $50 million goal by the end of our fiscal year. We are working with a couple of foundations where when we meet certain benchmarks, then they are committed to at least having a conversation with us about going to the next level. We are going to use that as a lever to bring other individuals into moving us forward. I'd like to thank the presidents and their development officers for all the work that they have done in the past 4 years, helping us move forward in this fundraising initiative. I understand, and we all know that this is a space that we have not traditionally been involved in, but it is going to be our new space moving forward. So we need to figure out a way to get comfortable in moving in that direction. In the last 2.5 weeks, we've had an opportunity to present our data from the Decision Theater. The Decision Theater is at Arizona State University, and the data that was presented was on economic modeling. What we were trying to demonstrate are the future consequences of not funding the community colleges, and specifically Maricopa Community College. For those of you who have not read my op-ed piece 2 Sundays ago, I would recommend that you look at that, because it is a respectful way to share the current situation for the Maricopa colleges, both today and moving forward. Because it's asking all of our stakeholders, including our state, our governing board, our broader community, to understand that there are consequences for not funding the largest community college in the state of Arizona. And those consequences may not be materialized within the first or second year, but the Decision Theater allowed us to look at economic modeling to the year 2025 and to the year 2045. And when you look at the number of transfers, students that come from our institutions are going to the workplace, we also focused on about 7 different demand areas that need to be looked at over the next 10 to 20 years to say if we don't meet the demand, then where will it come from? If we aren't committed to funding, then where will the funding come from? That we will need to make some choices moving forward. But what I like about the Decision Theater, because it does not make any decisions, it makes a series of assumptions, and it allows you to move the levers in many different directions. A $2 increase in tuition or more, a 2% increase in the levy or more. The entrepreneurial piece on the expenditure limitation is another lever, the bond referendum, and you heard in the study session the notion of an override. These are all things that are within our control to look at. The one thing about the expenditure limitation is that I am pleased that it has made it through the Senate, and now we're in the House. That is a bill that can truly take us to another level in terms of our ability to be innovative and take over a space that only the Maricopa colleges can hold at this particular point at a significant level, and that's around entrepreneurism. We have a number of individuals within our district that I think can take a great advantage of that, and we are being looked at both here in Arizona and outside the state in terms of whether or not this will move forward. The impetus of the entrepreneurial focus is that it will allow us to not only make money to replace the state aid, but it will allow us to keep the resources. It is an increase in capacity, not an increase in taxes, and it is something that I believe the Senate has given us an opportunity to now try to present our case to the House, and we hope that we will be successful as we move forward. If not, then we will have to step back and see what the next direction is. But for the last 7 months, I have been to every chamber in the Valley. I've been to community-based agencies. I have been to Greater Phoenix Leadership, East Valley Partnership, East Valley Think Tank, and anyone who would listen to talk about the fact that we have ideas, we have innovations. Just give us a chance, and we will see where we can go with their support both today and in the future. So that is my report, and I think the foundation is laid. And I would also like to thank the board for supporting all community colleges coming together last month for our study session around expenditure limitation. It was well received by the other presidents and CEOs in the state and their boards, and as a matter of fact, they would like for us to consider hosting on other topics as well moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Any questions to the Chancellor? If not, approval of the order of the agenda as amended. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. The first item is consideration of the consent agenda action items. Does anyone wish to remove any items from the consent agenda?
Move
Mr. Sarr.
approval.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The non-consent agenda, the consideration of non-consent agenda action items. Is there a motion? You're up.
The president's word.
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
We're on item 12.1.
I have an electronic version of this that you can.
Oh, somebody just handed it to me. Thank you very much. There we are. Oh, that's because we moved it, yes. This is item 12.1. It is the Emeritus Distinction Award to the Chancellor. There is an item, an action item in each of our packets. I'm not going to bother to read this. I'm going to bother to just make a statement. This system has been faced with an extraordinary challenge, and it's the kind of challenge and the kind of perfect storm of challenges, if you will, that could have perhaps crippled any other system. It didn't do so because of the extraordinary leadership of Rufus Glasper. I was at ACCT, not this past year, but the year before, where I heard this system described as the Harvard of community college systems. And I think it is true. This is perhaps the finest and the best and the most innovative and the most admired community college system in the United States. And it is not by accident. It didn't grow organically and simply to be so. It occurred because of the extraordinary leadership that this college system has had. If we begin with Dr. Elsner, who to a great degree designed the system that we have today, and did so with great leadership, great grace. But it's important to keep in mind, and I admire and I'm a friend of Dr. Elsner. I don't mean to be critical of him in any way. But it was during his time of extraordinary growth. This county was explosive in growth. We had rarely an objection to our growth or to available funds. The legislature, under very different leadership at the time, was making heavy investments into this system, recognizing that a college system was absolutely necessary to the economic growth. Dr. Glasper has not had that luxury. Beginning in 2008, as we know, in 2007, as recession hit across the country, there was millions of dollars lost to this community college. On top of that, since beginning at that time, each year the legislature reduced, year after year, the amount of funds that were available to this system each year till they finally arrived at zero, and then the final insult. They wrote us out of the statute. It was during this period of time we're faced with the IT scandal. It's and at the time, as was mentioned earlier, this podium was almost at every meeting full of people telling us how the end had arrived, how we were going to fall apart, how the system could not survive that blow. And it did so. It survived all of that with extraordinary grace. I know that faculty and staff not very often complain about the fact that we haven't done steps on a proceeding way every year. But if you put into perspective that we lost $60 million state funding, that we're facing no new money or relatively small amounts of new money in new construction, where a substantial portion of our past income came from. If you put all of that into perspective, the fact that we've been able to maintain the level of excellence that we have is due to the extraordinary leadership and to, frankly, the extraordinary team. I'm very sad to see the Chancellor go, but I'll be honest with you. There's an extraordinary team here. It's going to go forward. There is depth. The Chancellor built such a team, and it is to a great degree sitting before you. There is no shortage of brilliant minds ready to lead, and that includes the faculty. It includes the adjunct faculty. It includes the staff. And I attribute all of that to the Chancellor. So the action item before us is granting emeritus distinction to Rufus Glasper. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Burke.
I was active in faculty government in the mid-'80s when Dr. Glasper came to the district. So I've watched his progress in the district for the last 30 years. And I'm really pleased for the last 6 years to have an opportunity to work closely with him as a governing board member. I think Dr. Glasper reflects success that employees can have in this district. He reflects success that students know as they go to our program and go on to work or to the four-year schools. And I'm pleased about his new appointment where he will be working with over 800 colleges across the country to help the community college effort. So I have great respect for him and just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed working with him through the years.
Mr. Sarr.
I won't repeat all the good things that have been said because I agree with all of them. It's been 6 years for me that I've worked on the board here and had the chance to serve with Dr. Glasper and his team. And having been 14 years prior to that in the K-12 world, I had a lot to learn over those 6 years and still do. Dr. Glasper has been a mentor in many ways and has had to put up with a lot of goofiness sometimes from ideas that board members bring to him. But he's always been a person who listens and who extracts the best of those suggestions and makes them for real. And I think that's what makes board work so important to all of us. So I congratulate the Chancellor on almost 30 years of effort here in the Maricopa District and look forward to working with him in another role, but certainly an important one to the district as he leads the Center for Innovation in community colleges. So congratulations, Dr. Glasper, and best of luck to you.
Is there any other discussion? Ms. Haber.
I have only been on the board for a year, but my experiences have been extraordinary thanks to Dr. Glasper. I think something that had really impressed me immediately was the positive attitude that I saw among the presidents and the teachers. And one president recently remarked to me how Dr. Glasper gives the presidents the authority they need to make the changes that are necessary, but he holds them accountable at the same time. And I do think that's the secret. He keeps politics out of the colleges, which I've seen devastate school districts before. I think that's a big reason. So I'm sad to see him go, and I'm very grateful for the year that I've had to get to know him and to appreciate all of his accomplishments.
Mr. Heap.
I'd like to thank Dr. Glasper.
Excuse me, Mr. Heap, is your microphone on?
I'd like to thank Dr. Glasper for the short time that I've been here, to watch him adapt through some very critical times. He's absolutely adept on his feet. So We have had fun along the way in travels, and I'd also like to congratulate him on joining our class of graduate board members in the world of retirement.
Ms. McGrath.
I too would like to say that we're going to greatly miss the chancellor. He's done a wonderful job. He's been very good to those of us who are new board members, directed us, helped us learn the ropes, so to speak, and he's done a wonderful job, and we're going to miss him. Thank you, Dr. Glasper.
Ms. Livingston.
Well, again, I'm part of the news sector. It's been an amazing year, and of course it will continue to go on. I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for this board and for myself, and I wish you nothing but personally the best. Thank you, sir.
No further discussion. You have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Dr. Glasper, you are now a distinct person.
I am now what?
A emeritus distinction.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I make it?
Dr. Glasper.
I will be brief. You have heard me enough for almost 30 years. And I mentioned the other day that I will leave a month and a half short of 30 years in the system. 3 words that I shared when I assumed this position in 2003 was inclusiveness, engagement, and respect. And I want to leave those as the pillars of a level of expectation of engagement. We would not have made it through the recession if we did not come together as a system. All employee groups and the board allowing us to work together to bring solutions to this system. I do not think that things have changed in terms of the landscapes, because we still have challenges along the way. But we have also demonstrated that we can do more with less, but we cannot do it forever. We will be reaching some points where some tough decisions will have to be made. What I am eager to do in this next role is to test this whole notion of innovation. And I know when Eddie Jenner was in leadership, he didn't take too kindly to the terms disruptive innovation. And it wasn't, in a sense, trying to be demeaning to faculty or any, it's just a different term. But I think we need to be more disruptive in many different ways and be more innovative and out of the box and find that level of risk that we want to assume and go to the edge and look over that precipice and make a choice. And if we do that, then I think this will continue to be one of the best systems in the country. And I think we have demonstrated that. So keep your heads up. I have talked to a number of the boards that I'm involved in here in the Valley, and will stay active, and will try to bring closure to a number of those requests that I have for funding for the colleges over the next few months. So you will see me more at the foundation, trying to check in with Mary and whoever else is there, and I will do my best to do you well in terms of supporting you in my new role as an external advocate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. .1, the approval of proposed fee changes. Vice Chancellor.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is the second reading for this item, and action is requested. We are proposing 150 new fees, 450 fees to be increased, and 209 fees either to be reduced or eliminated. And the estimated net revenue impact is $226,000 approximately. We recommend its approval.
Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the item? If not, all those in favor? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Item 13.2, proposed tuition, approve proposed tuition and fees. We just did that. No.
The second one,
Tuition.
was fees.
Right.
Now the second one is proposed.
13.2, Vice Chancellor.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is an action item as well, and it is recommended that the board approve the tuition and fee schedule as presented. As you know, since the summer, there have been many discussions with the board about needs and resources for fiscal 16-17. This item is seeking approval of the proposal for a $2 per credit hour increase in tuition and fees and other elements of the schedule, which includes the introduction of a senior rate for tuition. Though it's not an action item for tonight, as we've discussed the budget, I believe the board knows that we're also going to be seeking a 2% increase in the tax levy. In total, the increased revenues from the $2 tuition increase, the 2% tax levy, and an increase in property taxes from new construction would provide resources to fund some programmatic priorities as well as compensation adjustments for employees. Programmatic adjustments include operating costs for our 2004 bond program, additional funds for technology to continue to improve those operations, movement of some faculty funded by Prop 301 funds to the general fund, insurance, improvement in the 60-40 faculty ratio by adding some additional residential faculty, funds for a seamless student enrollment project for loan default management, and some One Maricopa student success funds. For compensation, we do have an increase that already was approved by the board to increase funding for flex benefits. The state of Arizona State Retirement Board has increased the tuition rate, the state retirement rate very slightly, and then we will be proposing a 2% COLA and a step adjustment contingent on the approval of these resource increases, as well as some adjustments for employee manuals. I wanted to close by just reminding the board of some history. Since fiscal 08-09, the district has raised tuition and fees and adjusted taxes for 2% in 4 of the 8 years. This would be the 5th time in 9 years if one or both proposals are approved. At the same time, we lost nearly $70 million in state aid, and we cut budgets on an annualized basis by $35 million, as well as cutting $11 million in capitals that we were no longer receiving from the state. Because we had very limited resources during this period, we had both very limited programmatic and compensation adjustments. As an example, if steps and salary adjustments are approved this year, this would be the 3rd time both are approved in 9 years. And finally, with respect to steps, this has been a standard type of compensation adjustment for many, many years, though not one that has been guaranteed, as you can tell by the history. That having been said, the classification and compensation study is continuing, and in the future, as has been shared with the board by the district's human resources leadership, it's not clear what form salary adjustments may be made, but this has been the history in the past. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Are there,
I move approval, Mr. Chair.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Ms. McGrath?
I just want to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Yes, ma'am. A roll call vote has been requested. Ms. Smith?
Mr. Burke,
Aye.
Mrs. Haber,
Aye.
Mr. Heap,
No.
Mrs. Livingston,
No.
Mrs. McGrath,
I'd like to explain my vote.
Proceed.
I was elected by a very large margin in my district. I received 70% of the vote running against an incumbent board member. The main reason I was able to gather that number of votes is because I've said that I would do my very best to lower taxes and to lower tuition. We've had a loss in students. We've gone from 81,736 full-time student equivalents to 72,510. I think that perhaps if we raise tuition, we might lose even more students. There's a definite relationship between what you pay and what you get and the perception of whether it's worth it, and I vote no.
Mr. Saar?
Mr. President, I'd like to explain my vote as well.
Proceed.
Tuition increases have always been a struggle for me, and I haven't always voted in favor. But there's a lot going into the discussion about the future of our institution. The $2 increase in tuition is equivalent to $2 a month for a full-time student. I personally don't think that's a burden on anybody, especially since the greatest number of our students' tuition are covered through government grants and scholarships. That being said, I look to the students, as we heard tonight from one of them, that it is our responsibility as a board to hold the district accountable to making sure that those additional investments provide a return, and the return comes to the students. And one of the most effective areas of what a student gets from their investment is coming from the classroom faculty and to those who support the classroom faculty. This will be in our discussions as a board, the last time that we will hopefully fund the STEP system. It's been around way too long. It's time to go to a more progressive type of compensation that includes more of a performance base. And I think the new compensation package and what we see coming out of that is going to improve both the performance that our students recognize from their classrooms as well as those who support the classroom. So I look forward to that transition in compensation, and I vote yes for this tuition increase.
Mr. Gutierrez?
I'd like to explain my vote. Raising tuition is, I think, the toughest thing we do. It is, we know who our students are. There's 200,000 of them. Very few of them are not on Pell Grants or scholarships. The vast majority are. There are limited resources. And so raising tuition is one of the toughest things we can do. On the other hand, we have been placed in an impossible situation. We have heard about the reductions in state support, the reductions that have gone across the system, and the system is in jeopardy. And these are tough decisions. Even with this increase, we will continue to be the fifth lowest community college tuition in the United States, even with this. Frankly, we could raise it $8 and not change that status. This has been an extraordinarily well-run district. It continues to be. But we can't print money and we can't make magic. So from time to time, sacrifices are required. And this time, it's going to be required of the students. One of the reasons I can do this without remorse, frankly, is that I know that Pell Grants cover this. I know that scholarships cover this for most of our students. And I know ultimately what we're talking about is what Mr. Saar just said. It's $2 for a full-time student. It is not an exorbitant amount. But think about this. We don't do this. We wait. We don't do it next year. We wait. We don't do it. We don't do it until the crisis absolutely forces us to. And what we're going to be faced in that time is increases that are intolerable. We'll be faced with $10 and $15 and $20 increases if we wait until the system is at its very edge. So, yes, I do not cherish this vote, but I didn't get elected to have a good time on this board. I didn't get elected to simply take the easy decisions. I came on this board fully knowing that the legislature had gone from 30-some% of when I served in the legislature of the budget of the community colleges to when I was first appointed, 1%. And it is now 0. And I came on this board for that very reason, is that I recognize that apparently somebody's plan is planned obsolescence for the most important higher education institution in this state. 60%, over 60% of the students at ASU come from our system. Over 60%. This is the most important institution in the state of Arizona. And it is important. We talk about economic development, etc. It's important to students' lives. What matters is, and I think they recognize it, I think you ask your students, they recognize it, is they're in this system at $86 a credit hour now and receiving an extraordinary education that makes them competitive. In fact, they excel. ASU students who enter at year 1 excel. So what does that mean? That means we have an incredible faculty, an adjunct faculty. And if we continue to ignore that faculty and simply assume that they will work without pay and any kind of pay increase forever, that's a silly assumption. We're putting morale at risk. We can't continue to do that. We have to meet our obligations, or we have to agree that what our future is a second-rate institution. I didn't get elected to this board to create or to participate in the decline of an institution this magnificent to turn it into a second-rate institution. These are tough decisions, but that's why we're elected. I vote aye.
The vote is 4-3.
Motion passes.
Yes.
13.3, approval of a job order contracting for remodel shop warehouse at the Maricopa Skills Center. Vice Chancellor.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is a remodel of about 5,800 gross square feet at the Maricopa Skills Center. It will allow the relocation of the precision machining manufacturing programs from Gateway's 40th Street campus and allowing the programs to work together. The program will utilize existing space without adding to the building side and will include an equipment lab, inspection room, tool crib, locker area, and a shared office, and we recommend its approval.
You've heard do we have a motion?
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. In discussion?
Sure.
Mr. Sarr.
You know, in the meeting we had earlier this month where we go through this agenda, I want to just repeat pretty much what I said there so that everybody knows the fact that the Skills Center is an important aspect, both of them actually, of our institution. And we've been working very hard at both Gateway and the Skills Center on Buckeye downtown to make sure that those facilities provide the type of instruction that business and industry partners in the Maricopa County are looking for. And this particular project will move equipment from the Gateway campus to the Skills Center to make sure that we are in a position to provide those students who are looking to get into manufacturing the particular skills that our industry partners are asking us to provide. And I think this is an excellent way of utilizing bond monies to make sure that we are providing students with the knowledge they need for their future. And I think this is one of those elements that we do so well.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 13.4, approve construction contract for the T2 building at Glendale Community College. Vice Chancellor.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is a contract for about 11,100 square feet for design and remodeling of this space. It will provide students with a modern facility for instruction, training, and experience in their study of food, nutrition, and fitness and wellness. The remodeled facility will contain lecture, classrooms, nutrition, and sports performance labs with prep rooms, and we recommend its approval.
Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? 14.1, the approval of the interim chancellor's contract 2016. I would just note that Dr. Maria Harper Marinick was approved as interim chancellor in our last meeting. This goes specifically to her contract. Vice Chancellor Shelton Johnson.
Thank you, President Gutierrez, members of the board. This is a request that the governing board approve the interim chancellor's contract for employment. The contract is dated March 1st, 2016, and provides that it will end on the start date for a new chancellor.
We have discussed this, by the way, in a variety of ways and in an executive session. So it has been greatly discussed. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? If there is no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Interim Chancellor Marinick. Information items. Human Resources, review employments. Vice Chancellor Shelton Johnson. And Vice Chancellor, can you do 15.1 and 15.2 simultaneously?
Yes, thank you. President Gutierrez, members of the board, these are the new employments and separations for the period of January 1st through January 31st. For that period, we had a total of 60 new hires and 46 separations.
Is there any discussion? No motion is necessary. Business service, a preliminary proposed fiscal year budget. Vice Chancellor.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is our first presentation on the budget, though, as I've mentioned, we've had many discussions since the summer about the budget and what it might be looking like. Gay Murphy is approaching the podium, and she'll give a brief presentation, and we'll continue with presentations into future meetings where we discuss the budget as we move towards final budget adoption.
Ms. Murphy.
Excellent. Well, that is one difference with the new subcommittee system in the Budget and Finance Subcommittee. My presentations keep getting briefer and briefer throughout the year because I think the board has more knowledge about the budget as we move along. Thank you very much. We're introducing the budget tonight as an information item. The proposed budget for fiscal year 16-17 will be down slightly. There is a net increase in the general operating fund. The auxiliary and restricted fund are both relatively flat, and we have a decrease in the capital fund as we continue to spend down the bond revenues that we received through the 2004 capital program. In terms of our general operating fund, we're supported primarily through property taxes and an in lieu of tax payment from the Salt River Project. Our next highest is tuition and fees at 31%. Then we have other and fund balance and transfers at about 6%. With the auxiliary and the restricted fund, both are slight decreases, both just looking at just kind of like a course correction in the budget. And we have a slight decrease in enrollment, which kind of affects the overall operations through those areas. In terms of our capital fund, our plant fund, we're down 63.7 million. All of that is attributed to spending down of bond revenues. We are looking at an increase in the secondary tax levy by a total of 2.1 million, and that's so that we can pay the debt service. We try to make that a relatively flat payment, but there is some fluctuation along the way. And so the secondary tax rate will decrease slightly because the property values have increased. So we don't want to over-collect, so we will adjust that property rate, that property tax rate, so that we will collect the appropriate amount of debt service. We did have a wonderful thing happen. As I had indicated, one of the things we were waiting for is to hear from the county assessor's office about assessed valuations, and they notified us that, wonder of wonders, new construction was increasing. We were trying to be pretty conservative with new construction because last year we saw at the last minute, instead of going up from 8.8 million, it dropped down to 7.4. So we are excited to see it increase to almost 10 million. And because of that, we were able to provide some additional resources into the budget, and I'll highlight those. So again, the new construction was where we picked up about $2 million. We still haven't heard from SRP yet about their in lieu payment. That will pretty much be the final adjustment into the resources of the budget, but we think we'll have about $26.4 million. In looking at the proposed uses, Ms. Thompson has explained all of the proposed uses, and we've gone over those previously. So I just want to focus on the 3 areas that we're proposing to change. We're looking at moving about $1 million worth of faculty. It'll probably be 9 to 10 people from Proposition 301 funding to Fund 1, which will secure them into the future. That's something that we were just not able to do every year when we had the major funding crisis going on with the state, but this will make a healthy dent. We'll be able to increase the numbers of residential faculty as we move towards having 60% of the instruction taught by residential faculty, and we'll be able to increase the investment in the One Maricopa student success resources. So again, the proposed uses match the additional revenues, and that's $26.4 million. In terms of looking at the combined primary and secondary tax rate, we're looking at about $10 million from the new construction, plus the 2% increase in the primary tax levy. With SRP, it's going to be pretty flat contribution. In the assessment per $100,000 or per $100 of assessed valuation, primary would be $126, secondary $22.74, and for the total of $148.98 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. And what we're looking at, the piece with the 2% increase in the levy, is on the average, it would increase payment by $2.50 per $100,000 of assessed valuation across Maricopa County. So for homeowners who were homeowners last year, we think that the 2% increase in the tax levy would increase their payment to Maricopa by $2.50. And I wanted to explain a little bit because there were some questions about property tax and how the property tax works. Arizona has an unbelievably complicated property tax system, and here's kind of how I think about it. Maricopa's levy is the dollar amount approved by the governing board, that liquid amount that fits within the container. It fits within that maximum set by the Arizona Constitution. And our governing board decides the amount of the levy, but it doesn't control how much different property owners contribute to paying that levy. There are, there's like 9 different types of property. The 2 biggest are business property and residential property that's homeowners, owner-occupied residential property. So the state of Arizona passes laws that control how much each of those types of property contribute to the tax levy. It doesn't affect the amount of levy we collect, because that's based on what you, our governing board, decide. What the legislature determines through different laws is how much each one of those groups contribute to our overall levy. When that levy's set, we don't have any control over who contributes. We inform, in fact, they don't even pay us. We inform the county treasurer, and they send out the tax bills, and the property owners pay the treasurer's office, and then they, in turn, pay us based on that levy that you've approved. One of the things we do have a little bit outside of this picture is for owner-occupied residences. The state stepped in with a program they call the homeowners rebate, and the state will use that homeowners rebate funding to buy down the property tax payments for owner-occupied residences. It's not all homes. If you have rental property, it falls into one of the other categories. But if you are a residential homeowner, the state will look at offsetting part of your rates, and they're going to do that. There's going to be an increase in that program that's proposed for next year to go from like $359 million to $390 million to kind of buy down that homeowners' payments. So that's pretty much it. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Ms. Haber.
Well, I'm just a little bit confused on the homeowners.
Right.
That means that'll be less money for the homeowners or more money for the homeowners?
I think what they're trying to do is keep the homeowners pretty constant so that they are going to increase the rebate that goes to homeowners in fiscal year 17. That's at least the proposal statewide.
So does that make up for the fact that they are changing the formula regarding so it'll
Yes.
probably not have an effect, it'll just save us from an incredible rise for homeowners, maybe?
That is, I believe, what the program tries to do.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Ms. Murphy. The monitoring reports, Vice Chancellor Thompson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is the budget analysis report, which looks at the general unrestricted fund, and it is for the period through January of 2016. It, as a report, looks at what the budget is, compares actuals, both in terms of revenue collections and expenditures, to the budget, and then also compares to prior periods. And as is typical, our expenditure pattern is similar to prior years. As I've mentioned many times, that's mostly because most of our spending is in payroll and benefits, and that occurs on a cycle of every 2 weeks. And then in terms of revenues, that's very typical to prior years as well. We've gone through the first major cycle of collecting our property taxes, which is our main revenue source. That was in October and November, and we'll see another cycle coming up this spring. But we are on target in all respects and expect to meet our financial stability requirements.
Questions of Ms. Thompson? If not, the next item is community linkage. This is where governing board reports, governing board members offer their individual reports. But if I may, with permission of the board, I'd like to take a point of personal privilege. Lee Combs, our general counsel, is leaving us. This is his final meeting. The last time he will be with us as general counsel in one of these meetings. Lee joined us about 2009. He had lived in Colorado and served in an extraordinary capacity in Colorado, as I've read. As an assistant attorney general in charge of educational institutions, as counsel to higher institutions in Colorado. He joined us in 2009. My personal experience with Lee is that we've mentioned it a number of times tonight. Mention it again. There was a IT breach, a scandal. The magnitude of it, the proportion of it, wasn't known to us initially. It appeared to be, at least the magnitude could have been, in literally the hundreds of millions of dollars. It was very hard to understand all of the elements of it. There was, during that period of time, the 2 and 3 years, incredible controversy in this board, controversy between board members, executive sessions that were exceedingly difficult. And overseeing this process of making sure that, one, we mitigated liability exposure, and two, that we created an IT system and a security system for the future that was first rate. Overseeing this entire process was, of course, the chancellor, and at his side was Lee. Lee oversaw the legal part of this. And I can tell you that we have not yet arrived at a final settlement, but I can assure you that the crisis that we foresaw, I mentioned this before, but the podium there, almost every meeting, at every meeting on Citizens Interim was filled with people telling us that we would be bankrupt, that the system couldn't possibly withstand the liability that we had created, etc. It's an exceedingly difficult time, but a very thoughtful and calm guidance from our legal counsel helped us move through all that. And so I personally want to thank Lee, and I personally want to say that thank you for leading us through the most tumultuous period, I think, that any board could ever imagine. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Chancellor for the opportunity to serve this district and all of its extraordinary leaders and people. I know that we're both leaving it, but the Chancellor has made it a very strong organization, and I know that the board will maintain its focus as it has through this crisis, and will sail on, as you say, with good grace. I plan to go off into the sunset for a while. I have a long list of things to do. Only my wife's is longer. But I'll never lose my passion for education as an enterprise, and I suspect that I'll find my way back as a volunteer somehow.
Thank you
very much.
Mr. Starr. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Haber.
I would like to thank Mr. Combs for how helpful he was to me. When I first came upon the board, I was in need of some guidance in that I wanted to do the right thing, to be ethical, to follow the open meeting law. and he had a meeting with me. He answered all my questions and gave me some very excellent advice that I have followed, and I'd like to thank him very much for that.
Mr. Sark.
And I'll just briefly say the same thing that's been said many times, and thank Lee for his support in some difficult times, especially with the data breach, but every day there's legal issues that come up from people who fall down in the parking lot to those who have serious issues with their grades. So Lee covers quite a scope of legal issues in his office, and I know his staff that he's put together will continue that until we find a replacement, and I want to wish him the best in his retirement.
Let me announce the substitutions for today. I should have done this earlier. But sitting in for President Irene Kovala of Glendale is Vice President Terry Reese Leba. Leba Reese. Community linkage, Mr. Burke. Governing board reports.
I had the pleasure of going to the Black Mountain campus for the Aquila Hall dedication this past month. Wonderful facility. It focuses on science courses primarily, but a beautiful building, and there was an event for fundraising and also a second event for the building dedication. Enjoyed that very much. And then along with other board members, I attended the National Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. We were able to talk to a number of representatives and to Senator McCain, and those were very fruitful meetings. I enjoyed that very much. I would like to talk about something that we did tonight very quickly. We approved curriculum. We do that periodically, but I would like to point out to the board what work goes into that action item that we just sort of accept. Faculty do curriculum. They write courses, they revise courses, but there are staff on each of the campuses that help them write those. They take those to a campus curriculum committee. It's discussed there because the college needs to know, what is this going to cost? Will this require faculty? Those are decisions that are involved in curriculum. It then goes to an instructional council at the district level in each discipline, and faculty from other colleges look at the course and determine what effect that will have on their course offerings. They approve the courses or the change in courses. Then it goes to a district curriculum committee where faculty from each of the colleges and administrators look at the curriculum to see what effect that will have on the district and the budget. And then it comes to us. But what we did in a matter of seconds takes hours on the part of faculty, staff, and administrators. And I just wanted to point out that that is a significant work that is ongoing, and I want to give credit to faculty, staff, and administrators for that work.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Ms. Livingston.
I don't have anything, but I'd like to second what Mr. Burke just said. What the faculty does is truly amazing, and we just, waved a wand and approved it. So thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you.
Ms. Haver.
I actually had the same experiences as Mr. Burke, and I can also attest to the fact that the Black Mountain site for science and technology is quite amazing. And I went to D.C., and something I experienced at D.C. that I really appreciated was a debate, and it was between Republican Steve Schmidt and Democrat, the journalist Eugene Robinson. And it was clear very soon that the two men were very good friends, and they had differences of opinions, but they were highly respectful of each other. And I thought, well, this is a good model for all of us. It was, in fact, Mr. Robinson had to leave early, and everyone remained quite spellbound by Mr. Schmidt, the Republican. And I think you could say there were probably more Democrats in the room than Republicans, but they all listened very closely. And that's the way things should be instead of contention all the time. And so I enjoyed that a lot.
Mr. Heap?
I also attended the Black Mountain opening. Science and industry has always been my world, so it was a pleasure seeing the quality that was put into it. But what amazed me was not just the science and effort, but was the communication, the community association with the YMCA. So in other words, the YMCA stepped up and is supporting the school, and also has using some of the facilities. So that's beautiful. The interact in these tough times in the economy, this participation has really helped. Went to Washington D.C., the ACCT, and what was always interesting in that is meeting with other board members and finding out that there's no two colleges alike, and all their difficulties and what they're going through, and their interaction with the government. Some of them worried that they're getting their licenses taken away from them. Their board members are not exactly interacting, and so the world keeps on going. But what we found here was that they are adapting throughout the United States. They're adapting to all the changes, technology, the finances are changing, the demands are changing, the students are different walks of life, so they are taking the responsibility and they're moving forward and making their school better as the world is turning. So thank you.
Ms. McGrath?
Thank you, Mr. President. What I'd like to report upon is a change of staff that we've had. We now have Gloria Smith as the assistant to the board, and I'd like to say what a wonderful job she's been doing and what a smooth transition it's been, and we're very grateful that she was transferred to us instead of somewhere else.
Woot, woot. Mr. Sarr?
I was also in D.C. and at other dedications, but I was able to attend a one-day symposium for CTE faculty. That's where I spend most of my thinking time, is in that arena. And it was one of the better days that I've had a chance to experience with our faculty. You don't get to listen to those topics very often, and I want to thank Dr. Hupper-Marinick for putting it together along with others, Randy Kimmons and so forth. And I think more than anything else, the faculty enjoyed it. They had a chance to really share some ideas. They're going through some of the challenges that everybody goes through, especially when you consider that they work directly with our industry partners. If they can't provide the type of skills that our industry partners need, their classes don't exist. And I think the dedication that they showed at that conference in terms of meeting with their partners in industry and business is really going to improve our ability to meet the needs of this county for a long time coming. Thank you.
I was not in Washington, D.C. I took advantage of their all leaving to get some reading done on something other than contentious issues. I do volunteer and have raised funds for a series of lectures and films with the Raul Castro Institute at Phoenix College, and we did have a presentation. We will do so again in March and April and each of the following months. I encourage you to follow that series. It is focused on the border, focused on immigration issues, and it's really extraordinarily fascinating. So Mr. Sarr, School Board Association report.
I think the AADGB is first on the agenda, so.
Why don't you do that one, and I will go back to Mr. Burke.
Okay.
The AADGB will meet on March 10.
Okay. Mr. Sarr.
I like that. Obviously, we were in DC for a CCT. I'm on several committees, and the national organization has really focused on making sure that governing boards have the training they need, and I think you'll see more training opportunities for new board members and existing board members locally and regionally that we've not experienced for a number of years. And as far as ASBA is concerned, they're pretty much getting ready for the summer and the next school year. They're also involved in the legislative process, and the CTE and JTED issues have been successful, so things are looking up for that association as well.
The establishment of next meeting dates, times, and places is all wrong. Let me announce that what appears as 5 p.m. has been moved to 5:30. What appears at 6 p.m. has been moved to 6:30. So that on March 8th, the policy committee meeting will begin at 5:30. On March 8th, the agenda review will begin at 6:30. Also on March 8th, the work session will begin at 7:30. On March 22nd, the Budget and Finance Committee meeting will begin at 5:30, and the regular board meeting at 6:30. The regular board meeting that was scheduled for May 24th has been moved to May 17th. It'll be May 17th here in the governing board room. There will be, as we go through the process of selecting a new chancellor, a number of special meetings by this board. Many of them will be in executive session, some in open session, but we will be posting them as they become necessary. They will not be on the regular meeting dates, but will be special meetings. So keep an eye on that. If you're interested, those things will begin to occur and be posted relatively soon. With that, we will adjourn.